Hello, Gamecock fans. I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry. Welcome back to Ball Don't Lie, SGTV's premier live sports show.
JP and I will be giving you our weekly insight every Friday.
This week on the show, we're talking college football playoff rankings, as well as a halftime celebration for the Gamecocks this Saturday.
And in professional sports, we'll be recapping the final games and the outcome of this year's World Series.
Also, be sure to stick around for Week 4 of head-to-head college football pick'ems.
And without further ado, welcome to Ball Don't Lie.
Welcome to the Kennedy Greenhouse Studio.
I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry. When you get it all right, you can hear that, and it just flies out of Founders.
And 18-year-old phenom G.G. Jackson has really turned his play up a notch. I'm almost 2 years older than G.G. Jackson. He's doing things I couldn't even dream of doing.
They're the Golden Gamecocks. They're just so much fun to watch. What a historic year for them.
This is Ball Don't Lie.
South Carolina looks to keep their bowl game hopes alive against Jacksonville State this week as the Gamecocks host the Gamecocks in Columbia for the first time in program history.
Yeah, we haven't seen this one before, have we, JP?
Absolutely not. You know, South Carolina, been a bit of a rough stretch. The Gamecocks have dropped 4 straight. They've started 1-5 here in conference play. And last week was a little bit more of the same, but the Gamecocks showed a little bit more fight than we're used to, Spencer.
They showed a lot of promise, and the team looked a lot better on the whole. Texas A&M is a really tough team, and they've only lost to, really talented teams in Tennessee and Alabama. So the Gamecocks losing to them I don't think was a big surprise. But they did show a lot more promise than we'd seen from them in the past. But there's just not much this offensive line could do against Texas A&M's front 7, as they had 4 sacks and 10 tackles for loss in College Station.
Yeah, absolutely not. You know, the defense against a pretty solid Aggie offense, they performed, I think, a lot better than people expected, but the offense was stagnant yet again. Just 209 total yards, averaging only 5 plays per drive and 3.4 yards per play. But it's a little bit more than just football this weekend for South Carolina, isn't it?
It sure isn't. South Carolina will honor their winningest coach in program history, the legendary Steve Spurrier.
And, you know, Steve Spurrier, he's going to get all the praise. He's going to be speaking at halftime, maybe looking to rally the troops a little bit. But, you know, it's not just him. They're going to be honoring the teams from the greatest stretch of football in Gamecock history from 2010 to 2013. As we can see there, 42-11 overall record with a 23-9 conference play. And 3-1 in bowl games. You know, Spurrier came to a Carolina program that had won just 3 bowl games in their entire history. And he went 86-49 in his 10 years hemming the program, the most wins by a football coach in South Carolina history.
And just look at all those, not only ranked wins, look at those top 5 wins in 2010, taking down number 1 Alabama, in 2012, number 5 UGA, and then in 2013, beating number 5 and number 6 Mizzou and Clemson. I mean, this team was not only punching above their weight, but they were hanging in there with the very top teams in college football.
Absolutely, and you know, you see there they finished 8th in the AP poll, finished number 4. These are some of the best teams in the entire history of Gamecock football, and you know, they won the SEC East in 2010, and then in 2011, 2012, and 2013, they defeat the team that would go on to the SEC championship, but they could just never get over the hump themselves. But it was still one of just, you know, even just in college football, one of the best 4-year runs of any team. And it was, I think it spoke a lot to not just Coach Spurrier, but the culture that was cultivated by all the players. There, you guys, you can see you have Connor Shaw in that picture when they defeated Mizzou. And that was one of the best games of that entire college football season, one of the best seasons ever in 2013.
And these teams have so many memorable characters on them. You've got Connor Shaw, Steven Garcia, you've got Jadeveon Clowney, who, I'm sure you remember the Outback Bowl hit. Everyone probably the face of the planet does. It's framed in everywhere on campus. It's so memorable.
Some would say it's the best Ball Don't Lie moment in college football history.
We took a little inspiration from him, and it's hard not to. But JP, as much honoring of these Gamecock greats as they'll do this Saturday, they've got to play a football game in Jacksonville State. Even though it's their first year in the FBS, it's going to be a tough game.
Absolutely, you can come into any game with any game plan you want. Before the season, you can look and you say Jacksonville State's going to be an easy cakewalk victory for the Gamecocks. But when the going gets tough and the ball is snapped on a Saturday afternoon, someone's going to take a pass on yelling uncle, and all of a sudden you got yourself a ball game. And coming in here, the Gamecocks helmed by Rich Rod, the former Michigan and West Virginia head coach, implementing a lot more of that spread option offense we saw out of him in those legendary Pat White, Steve Slayton Mountaineers pioneer offenses in the mid-2000s. They have a dual quarterback system that's piled up a lot of rushing yards and a lot of rushing touchdowns as they're able to really master the option game.
They sure are, and you know, it seems like every week we find a new team that just can perfectly expose South Carolina, as it looks like a nightmare matchup on paper, as not only on the offensive end can they rush the ball with such efficiency in a dual quarterback system that has 18 combined touchdowns on the offensive side, but they have 15 different players with a sack on the defensive side, and linebacker Quay Drake leads the team with 63 tackles. I mean, it's going to be hard for the Gamecocks to move the ball. It's going to be hard for South Carolina to stop them on defense. This could be a really good game.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we played Texas A&M last week, who was one of the top teams in the country in terms of sacks and tackles for loss. We saw how that generated itself into material football action. Well, guess what? This week, you can see there on the graphic, Jacksonville State, 30 sacks on the season. That's 5th in the country. They have 66 tackles for loss, which is also in the top 10. So, you know, the Gamecocks' offensive line is going to be under siege. A lot of pressure looks for Jacksonville State. They're going to rush 5. They're going to rush 6. They're going to move a lot of stunting action. They're going to try and catch South Carolina in their splits, in their kick sets, catch them off guard, and speed to power moves. You see that a lot when you watch the Jacksonville State Gamecocks. You don't see it a lot when you watch the South Carolina Gamecocks somehow. When you'd think there'd be a little bit of a talent difference, but I think it's going to be a pretty good ball game here. It's a noon kickoff on ESPNU.
I think it is going to be a really good game, but another thing to mention, how about the success for Jacksonville State in their first year in the FBS, making the leap and going 7-2 to start the season? I mean, it's a really incredible turnaround, but it's not only them we've seen do it. We've seen teams like James Madison make the jump and be really successful. And it's so weird that these teams can just seamlessly make the transition and still have such a good record. It's truly an amazement. I mean, just a tribute to them.
Absolutely. You know, back in the 2000s and early 2010s, teams that made that leap, Georgia State, UMass,
App State, teams like that.
You know, those two teams looked terrible. App State jumped up. They were really the first that made the big leap, and they were immediately competitive. But we've seen a lot more with guys like Liberty and James Madison. They're jumping up, and they're immediately, now to be fair, you can say what you want about their schedule, but it's hard to win in college football, and these teams are going out and they're winning. Jacksonville State, one of their losses is to the undefeated Liberty Flames. But, you know, staying in South Carolina, the Clemson Tigers are looking to bounce back against the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame after losing last week's rivalry game against NC State.
And I think in the pick'ems we both took Clemson, so we both look like fools standing up here, but nonetheless, they'll have an even tougher matchup this weekend against Notre Dame.
Absolutely. You know, two pretty familiar foes. This is the 7th all-time meeting, and it's the 5th in recent memory, dating back to 2015. These teams have played with pretty high frequency with this new ACC agreement with Notre Dame football. But last year, you know, it was kind of an inverse situation for these teams. You had Notre Dame, they'd struggled. They were 5-3. They had lost to Marshall and lost to a terrible Stanford team. And the backs were up against the wall for the Irish, and they were able to flip the script. They blew out Clemson by 3 touchdowns, undefeated number 4 Clemson. And so ever since then, you know, Clemson, they're just 7-7 against Power 5 teams since then. You know, the two programs have gone in such different trajectories. And so it's going to be interesting to kind of revisit this. The last 2-4 start for Clemson in ACC play, 2008. That was Dabo Swinney's interim year when he took over for Tommy Bowden. And, you know, speaking of Tommy Bowden, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't at least touch on the little phone call Dabo got from Tyler from Spartanburg.
Your hometown, JP. I mean, getting some national news with a phone call with old Dabo, and tempers flared a little bit, didn't they?
Yeah, you know, it's right now in Clemson, it's the stuff going on behind the scenes is almost seeming more important than the stuff on the field, and you really just can't be having that when you're struggling, especially as, you know, Clemson's defense has been historically great. It's carried the team, it's put them in these positions to win these ball games. They've had a lead or had multiple chances to take the lead in all of their losses this year, but the offense for Clemson, it's a cacophony of errors. It's like watching Looney Tunes. Like, he's not going to step on the rake this time. He's not going to have the Acme weight fall on him this time. Nope. Clemson gets in the red zone. You saw there on that graphic, they're 7th in the nation in red zone trips, but they're one of the worst teams in all of college football.
That's you know, it's not like a small drop off. They dropped 117 spots when it comes to actually converting in the red zone, which is just ridiculous. And they can't move the ball through the air well. Cade Klubnik threw 50 passes for 263 yards and 2 interceptions, one of them being a pick six. He's putting them out of games.
Absolutely, and Peyton Wilson, who we mentioned last week, one of my favorite players in college football, was the recipient of that pick six, and it all starts with the turnovers. Yeah, it all starts with the turnovers. 15 given away. That's 109th in the country. They're the worst team in college football in terms of fumbles, losing 10 on the season, and it kind of all starts, Caleb Klubnik, he's had his struggles, but he's been really struggling to have time in the pocket. Clemson's offensive line has been on the decline for a couple years, and it's just been downright horrible this year. They're getting blown up back into the backfield. Klubnik has 0 time to throw, and when he does, he's getting hit as he throws, and it's going to peter out pathetically in the air and get picked off. And it's just, there's no good process here, because then you think, okay, maybe Clemson can sit back, give the ball off to their legion of 5-star tailbacks. Will Shipley, questionable for this weekend's contest against the Fighting Irish after suffering a concussion in Saturday's game against NC State. His backup, Phil Maffa, that's one of the best 1-2 punches in college football, but they've both struggled this year comparatively because the offensive line has been so bad. But we've talked a lot about Clemson and less about their opponent. And you can see there, it's kind of like South Carolina with how everything that South Carolina struggles with, their opponent is good at. Look at that. Notre Dame tied for 3rd in terms of turnovers forced, 2nd in red zone scoring defense, 5th in touchdown percentage. And then Cade Klubnik, one of the worst interception throwers in college football, going up against the college football leading pick man, Agent Zero, Xavier Watts.
I mean, it really is it's just perfect how that works out. And Notre Dame coming off an absolute massacre against Pitt. Just 58-7, just destroyed them in every facet of the game. But the Notre Dame offense is no slouch. They've got Audric Estime, arguably the best tailback in college football. They've got Sam Hartman, a proven veteran who's had some shaky moments as of late, but he's still Sam Hartman. He's a guy you can trust. And they've just got so much talent on the offensive side of the ball, and Clemson doesn't look like a team that can stop them this weekend.
Yeah, and that game against Pitt really kind of blows a hole in the whole transitive property of college football because, Notre Dame, a couple weeks ago, they go on the road to Louisville and they lose big. Louisville the next week gets blown out by Pitt. Then we fast forward.
How does that happen?
The Pitt super weapon strikes again, ladies and gentlemen. Pat Narduzzi, he has done it again. But then, you fast forward a little bit. Pitt loses by 51 to Notre Dame. So that's the beauty of college football. You can always have in your head what's going to happen, but something, it's the greatest story ever played. That's a really good quote by ESPN there. But, it's going to be, I think, coming into this, I'm going to the game. I'm excited to see the Fighting Irish in person yet again after the Duke game. But it's a game that I think people are thinking is going to be a little bit more of a blowout because of Clemson's defense. That's the one thing. They're really good at limiting explosive plays, 5th in the country in terms of 20-plus yards allowed. But Notre Dame has one of the more explosive offenses in college football. They're 3rd in terms of plays of 20-plus yards gained. So it's a really clash of styles. If Notre Dame's able to get it going through the air against a great Clemson secondary, Notre Dame's defense might pin their ears back and come after him like they did Caleb Williams. That's the thing. Notre Dame's done this against quarterbacks and offenses that are a lot better than Caleb Williams. They were able to shut down Ohio State to their worst performance in the entire Ryan Day era. So it might be a very long day to be a Clemson Tiger, at least on the offensive end. And the fans might get a little restless there in Death Valley.
And if they're without Will Shipley, I mean, that's really tough. I think it's almost like every other week we talk about Clemson, and I just wonder why they don't give him and Maffa much more carries. They're so dominant. I believe they were, 9th in rushing yards per game, and they just don't hand the ball off enough, I think, to use their backs, especially when you have a quarterback that's struggling. But I mean, JP, we don't stop at college football here on Ball Don't Lie. After the break, we'll catch you up on the MLB World Series. We'll be right back.
The MLB World Series concluded on Wednesday, where the Texas Rangers defeated the Arizona Diamondbacks to win the franchise's first ever championship title.
And what an awesome series this was. Maybe not as exciting as the other ones, but the moment. I mean, it was beautiful to see the Rangers finally get over the hump.
Absolutely. In 2010 and 2011, they lost back-to-back fall classics. And in 2011, they got to the final strike twice, and David Freese came through both times in Game 6. And, as Joe Buck said, we will see you tomorrow night. There was no tomorrow night for the Rangers here, as they were able to welcome a World Series championship to Texas with arms wide open. And they were, it was all about Corey Seager taking them higher, wasn't it, Spencer?
Thought you were going to say it's all about Creed, and I was like, well, it kind of is. But, I mean, Corey Seager, a man from Cabarrus County, he went to my high school. Absolute legend. 1.137 OPS, 3 home runs. They couldn't even pitch to him half the postseason. They were like, well, let's just walk him. And the other times they pitched to him, chances are he was sending it out to right field. One of only 4 players with multiple World Series MVPs, joining a stellar list of Sandy Koufax, Bob Gibson, and Reggie Jackson. I mean, those are good company, I would say.
Yeah, Mr. October himself, and he had that big game-tying home run in Game 1 of the World Series that really flipped the script on everything. The lights out previously, Paul Sewald on the mound, the outstanding Diamondbacks bullpen. They're 2 outs away from taking Game 1 in Texas. And all of a sudden, Corey Seager deposits one about 800 miles into the right field bleachers at Globe Life Field. And Adolis Garcia, who missed the final 2 games of the World Series with an injury, became just the 17th walk-off home run in World Series history in that Game 1 in the bottom of the 11th with a huge bomb there off Miguel Castro. He was so much fun to watch, but man, without Corey Seager, I feel like it would have been Nathan Eovaldi winning World Series MVP, as he went 6 innings with 5 strikeouts in the series clincher, and he was outstanding the entire run.
He sure was. It wasn't all about the bats, as Eovaldi was amazing. Montgomery was really good in the championship series. He wasn't as good in the World Series, but pitched some relief innings. His one start didn't go to plan, but I mean, it's all about getting the arms involved. Eovaldi was good, and the bullpen was just immaculate for the Rangers. Even when their starters couldn't go the distance, Scherzer didn't look great, and he ended up getting injured. It's just, it was tough for the injury battles, but.
Yeah, Josh Sborz was able to go multiple innings in that World Series clinching game. And even Aroldis Chapman was able to dust the old Houston Demons off his back in a big outing there to secure their AL pennant win. Nathan Eovaldi became one of just 4 pitchers in baseball history to have 5 wins in a single postseason, joining the big unit Randy Johnson, K-Rod, Francisco Rodriguez, and Steven Strasburg, who coincidentally also all did it in runs where their team won it all.
Yeah, it's hard not to think of a situation where he's not the World Series MVP if there's not a guy like Corey Seager just absolutely mashing from the plate.
And, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention World Series champion for the 3rd straight year on his 3rd straight team. Will Smith, relief pitcher, became the first player in baseball history to win 3 straight rings on 3 different teams. He was the closer, the lights-out man at the back end of that legendary night shift bullpen for the 2021 Braves, hitched a ride on the 2022 Astros, and then was there the entire way, pitching some pretty good high leverage innings for the Rangers.
He sure was, and this was a really good moment for the Rangers. But now we've got some other teams with long droughts, don't we, JP? We've got the Brewers in there. We've got the Mariners. The Rays are a new team, but they also haven't gotten their first title, and I believe the Padres are the other team, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of those teams have been to World Series in the past. You mentioned the Brewers. It's funny, this is the first time in a while that the team that beat the Brewers didn't win the World Series, but it was still true that every single time a team has defeated the Brewers in the playoffs, they've been to the World Series. The Brewers lost in the early 80s. The Padres got there in 1998, were swept by one of the best teams ever, the New York Yankees that season, who, with counting postseason wins, have the most wins of any team in baseball history. But the Mariners are that team. They've never been there. And they're the franchise that has had the most wins in MLB history in a season. So it's just baseball. How can you not be romantic about baseball? It's just such a tremendous sport. And we're going to be going a little bit without some Major League Baseball, but college baseball is right around the corner, and Gamecock fans have a lot to be excited with that.
They sure do. We are going to have to wait a little bit till about February till you can take to Founders Park and watch, Ethan Petrie, Gavin Casas just hit moonshots out there. I mean, that's going to be awesome. But JP, we aren't done with college athletics. I said, we're going to shift away, talk about the World Series. But the College Football Playoff Selection Committee released their first rankings of the season earlier this week, and boy, are they interesting.
They are indeed. It's the first of many rankings this year, and I'm kind of glad they punished Michigan. Michigan's schedule has been just one of the more atrocious, disgusting displays of out-of-conference scheduling in college football history. And they slipped in the rankings for it. And there's been new developments in the story of the SeatGeek sniper, Connor Stallions himself, as we have video evidence of him at Michigan games dating back to 2019, before he was even officially on payroll as an assistant coach for Michigan. There's also been alleged footage they're investigating to see if it's really him on the sidelines of Central Michigan this year when they played Michigan State. So sideline footage. But Spencer, your thoughts on the rest of the top 6?
I mean, I agree with you completely that Michigan being at 3 is a joke. I think they should be further out. They're not rewarding teams for actually playing good teams. And I feel like it's our civic duty as Pac-12 truthers. Why is Washington at 5? JP, why are they not at least in the top 4? They beat Oregon, and Oregon is still one of the best teams in the country. They beat a lot of other good teams in the Pac-12, and Michigan, the best team they've played is Rutgers.
You know, and even Georgia's schedule, if you took the name and the brand and the back-to-back national championships, for whatever that's worth, away from Georgia, and you just looked at their resume, even though they're undefeated, they're 4th at best.
2 and 3 would be switched with 5 and 6 in a world where the best team and who've actually played other good teams made sense.
Absolutely. You know, Florida State, their schedule's been brutal too, and there's really just no reason for them to be undefeated or them to be behind them when they're undefeated. But you know, what about some teams outside of the top 6 that might feel a little bit slighted?
You know, I think Oklahoma winning the Texas matchup, being at 9, they did lose to Kansas, so I kind of get it, but there's some weird things going on there with Texas beat Alabama, Oklahoma beats Texas. There's a weird thing going on there with the 7 through 9 teams, but Ole Miss at 10 is ridiculous to me. What
their
are
best
they
win
doing
is
there?
Tulane with a backup quarterback.
And they lose that game if Michael Pratt plays. Tulane is one of those teams that I think they should be ranked higher because they should. I think with a healthy QB, I think they're 8-0 on the year. And they beat Southern Cal in the New Year's Six Bowl last year. They returned their starting quarterback, and what do they get for that? They get ranked 24th.
Yeah, you know, there's no justice in this world.
And we're trying to bring it one Friday at a time.
The undefeated 8-0 Air Force Falcons slotting in at just number 25. Not respecting the troops, are they, at the selection committee? But, you know, it doesn't make any sense. How can you win every single football game you play and be ranked behind like a 2-loss Tennessee team? That their out-of-conference schedule was a complete joke. Southern Cal is number 20. The only teams they've played that have a pulse, they've gotten thrown into a locker and kicked into a canyon by. It just, you know, some of it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Because then you go and you respect the head-to-head in some aspects. Like you have Oklahoma State ahead of Kansas State. Similar records. Oklahoma State beat Kansas State. Makes sense. Same record, Kansas and Oklahoma State. Who do you think's ranked higher? Kansas. And I love Kansas. It was always the Jayhawks. But it's just, it's weird. And, you know, it's the first ranking of the season. It's going to be weird. They have to stir up controversy or else there's nothing to talk about. We wouldn't be here talking about it if it was perfect. If it was a perfect ranking. And people are people. There's going to be mistakes. There might be, you know, too many people on a committee to make mistakes, such as not dropping Utah after they got massacred by Oregon last week.
I rode with the Utes and I paid the price. My Pick'em's record is abysmal. Also, Penn State at 11, the one good team they've played, they got thumped by Ohio State.
It was not even. There was no.
It was the worst game I've ever watched.
It was like watching a boa constrictor take out like an impala. Like there was no ever way that Penn State was going to make it a game in any aspect. Ohio State just went to the old-fashioned trestle ball. We're going to get up a certain amount of points. It'll be more than enough to win. We're just going to sit on the football and run the clock out. But you know, the rankings are not set in stone. Teams that feel slighted might have a chance to improve their standing, and some of the teams that are looking to make a statement are going to have one, as the NCAA's best teams are going to look to shake up the rankings this weekend in a huge statement weekend for college football.
They sure are. I mean, just look at all the numbers up here. I mean, we've got ranked matchups galore. Let's start with Texas K-State, JP.
Yeah, you know, Texas, the one loss to Oklahoma, they lost Quinn Ewers for a large amount of time on the year. It's undetermined, but they know he's going to be out at least a couple more weeks. They slot in another quarterback, and they really rely on their run game as they're able to get a huge win against BYU, 35-6. Jonathan Brooks, 923 rushing yards, but they're going up against a Kansas State team that has made their presence known in terms of making life miserable for Big 12 title contenders.
Yeah, they do kind of have a knack for getting that upset win year in and year out. But as you mentioned, Jonathan Brooks, I feel like one of the most underrated tailbacks in the country. He doesn't get talked about enough, I think, because of the star power at quarterback and wide receivers. But he's almost had 1,000 yards so far, and he's just been incredible for the Longhorns. I think he's a key player to watch. Let's take it to a little SEC action. Georgia versus the Zoo, JP.
Yeah,
Talk to me.
You know, Georgia, this is their first test of the entire college football season. They're going up against a Mizzou team that has a tremendous offense and a pretty solid defense. And it's Mizzou off to their best start since 2013 when they started 7-1 as well. 2013, losing to South Carolina, but still going to that SEC championship game.
And they beat us this year. Let's preface that. They got the job done.
Exactly. They do. You know, it's Top Gun Mizzou, that high-flying offense with Brady Cook and Luther Van Burden III. Georgia is going to be hard-pressed, I think, to have guys step up and stop him without allowing Mizzou's other weapons to get open out in space. This one has all the makings of a fun one. It's a 3:30 CBS kickoff.
It sure does. I mean, the 3:30 CBS slot is just an all-time classic, and I think this is going to be a really good game. Georgia without Brock Bowers still, I think it's going to be a tall task for the Bulldogs, but bedlam. And conference realignment is killing some of the most beautiful games in the history of the sport, and JP, this might be the last one for a while.
It's the last scheduled meeting, and what better way, I think, you know, if this rivalry has to end, which it shouldn't, to have it end.
Absolutely not.
Going to Stillwater. You know, Oklahoma, the big brother, they're leaving. They're going for greener pastures in the SEC. They're leaving Oklahoma State behind in the dust. But the Cowboys, they got something to say about that. They had the college football leading rusher in their tailback, Ollie Gordon. 1,087 yards in just 8 games. They've been touting the rock with him to some big wins. They've won 4 in a row after starting 2-2. Mike Gundy and company, they're always going to have an elite defense. You know, even after they lost Jim Knowles to Ohio State at that defensive coordinator position. But Oklahoma, they're kind of reeling a little bit after that Kansas loss. Oklahoma State's looking to deliver that big knockout blow to the championship hopes of Oklahoma.
And that's what it's all about. Tons of these teams are looking to get into the college football playoff, and it's these rivalry games. It's like Oklahoma State hates Oklahoma. If they win this game, Oklahoma can no longer be in the college football playoff, barring an absolute miracle. But so there's so many levels to all these games this weekend. Another one, moving to, I don't want to call it our favorite conference, but maybe. Southern Cal versus Washington this weekend at 7:30. Probably the 2 best quarterbacks in the nation duking it out on ABC.
Yeah, you know, it's going to be a really fun matchup. Going to the Coliseum, this very well could be the last big high-profile game for Washington. The rest of their schedule, the rest of the way, eases up a little bit. Their defense has struggled a little bit. They struggled against Stanford on the road last week on the farm, giving up 33 points to the Cardinal. But the Southern Cal offense, looking to bounce back after having a couple shaky weeks. They had put up 50 points against Cal last week, but they needed multiple.
Every last one of those points.
They needed multiple double-digit comebacks and then a stop on a 2-point conversion in the final seconds to defeat the Golden Bears in Berkeley. That game's going to be a ton of fun. A lot of high-flying action is anticipated there. Probably the best quarterback matchup in the country. Kind of shocked that Game Day is ahead to that one, but we know how much Game Day loves this matchup. Alabama, LSU in a throwdown after last year was one of the best games of the entire college football season.
And a little CBS After Dark action, 7:45 kick there. And these two teams they've been playing thrillers, I mean, since the dawn of man, I think. I mean, this game is going to be amazing. Both of these teams typically we're used to seeing them at the 1-2 spot, but now they're 8-14. But they've got something to prove, as both offenses have kind of kicked it into gear. Well, LSU's has been in gear the whole season, but their defense is letting them down. But Alabama, I mean, everyone was like, oh, it's over after they lost to Texas, but maybe not so fast on the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, that is the one loss for Ole Miss on the season against the Crimson Tide, and they bounced back. They were down 20-7 at halftime in their last game. They came all the way back against Tennessee for that big win. And it's mostly just been, can Alabama put together 4 quarters of football? We haven't seen them do that yet this year, of high-quality, high-level football. And
they look awful in the first half on offense.
Yeah, and Tommy Rees, he was no stranger to that at Notre Dame when he was the offensive coordinator. It's going to be about how quick of a start LSU can get off to. We saw Tennessee, they were able to get out ahead 20-7. Ole Miss was able to get out to an early lead. Texas was able to get out to an early lead. But that's going to be a high-flying matchup between Jalen Milroe and Jaden Daniels and 8 other ranked teams on the road. This has the potential for one of the best weekends of all of college football.
It sure does. There's implications galore. We've talked about tons of good games. And we're going to take a little break. That's all we have for our graphic shows, all this. It's time for pick'ems. I'm horrible at them. JP's really good at them. We'll go to a quick break and be right back to wrap up the episode.
Welcome back to BDL Pick'ems. I'm currently 17-6 on the season, while Spencer sits at a paltry 10-13.
Paltry week in and week out. That's consistency.
Yeah, that's what we go for here on Ball Don't Lie.
We sure do. And JP, a game close to your own heart, Clemson versus Notre Dame.
Well, you know, it's the number 15 ranked Fighting Irish. It's a noon kickoff, which is an interesting one. You know, usually when Notre Dame comes to town to an ACC school, it's usually a big Hadou primetime affair. But Clemson, they've struggled so much this year that it got booted to the noon ABC slot. And, you know, like I said, I could come up here and give up some big, heartfelt speech with arms wide open and things of that nature. My sacrifice.
We could just sing Creed.
We could just sing Creed.
Yeah, we've thought about it.
But I'm not going to need to, because I have a good feeling about Sam Hartman. You know, he performed well against Clemson last year at Wake, and he's going to settle in that Notre Dame offense. They're going to get some big plays early. Notre Dame's defense is going to pin their ears back, come after Cade like some wild animals out there on the football field. The Irish are going to run all over Clemson, and I feel a big Notre Dame victory as the Golden Dome shine under the noonday sun in the upstate.
Yeah, I've also got the Fighting Irish in this one. I think Dabo might be getting a few more phone calls after this one, and I don't think the Clemson faithful are going to be happy. Notre Dame is a really, really good team, and I don't think Clemson offensively has what it takes to get it done unless they come out and really, almost entirely change what they've been doing.
If they can get eligibility for Taj Boyd, maybe he'll come back. But, you know, moving a little bit into the Midwest, we have a potential Big 12 Conference Championship elimination game as Texas takes on the Kansas State Wildcats. Spencer, who you got?
They've bitten me a couple times. Well, only once this year. They've only bitten me once, but I'd be a fool if I wasn't riding with my guys. It's always been the Longhorns. They're taking down Kansas State. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Jonathan Brooks, that's my guy.
You know, it always harkens back, I think, to an old 2012 matchup with Colin Klein at quarterback.
Oh, man.
Kansas State needed a big win over Texas to secure a Big 12 championship and keep their national title hopes alive. They went into Austin, and they paved them. I don't think that necessarily happens verbatim this weekend, but with Colin Klein calling the plays, Avery Johnson as the change of pace power quarterback run, Will Howard playing the best football of his entire career. After getting benched, he's thrown over 70% completion in his last 3 games. I think Kansas State is able to dig deep, get a big win, stay alive to defend their Big 12 title in a huge win in Austin.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game no matter what, I think. But moving on to the SEC, another 3:30 kick. We've got the number 2 Georgia Bulldogs versus the number 12 Mizzou Tigers. And JP, I got to ask you, who you got in this one?
You know, Georgia has 21 straight victories at home. They haven't
When was the last time they lost?
Oh, I believe it was to the South Carolina Fighting Gamecocks in 2019. But it's been a long time since an SEC East was able to SEC East team was able to fell the Bulldogs. It was Florida with Kyle Trask back in 2020. What do those teams all have in common? Great quarterback play. And guess what Mizzou has? Brady Cook, one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. He has the best wide receiver in college football, Luther Van Burden III. He has an offensive line. They have a running back to complement it, Cody Schrader, one of the best running backs in all of college football. They have a defense that's able to get a timely turnover, get some big stops in the red zone. And I think Mizzou is going to go in between the hedges and pull out a season-altering win over Georgia.
Yeah, I made my mistake. I picked the Georgia upset earlier in the year. I picked Kentucky. They look horrible. Devin Leary is not the big-time quarterback, but Brady Cook is. Give me Mizzou in Athens this weekend to just throw an absolute wrench into the SEC East.
Yeah, and now back to some Big 12 action, another rivalry, Bedlam. Historically dominated by the Oklahoma Sooners, but with all the nuance, all the context, this is one of the biggest Bedlam games of all time. Spencer, who do you have?
You know, I don't think many Big 12 truthers are going to like this one. The conference is splitting. Oklahoma is coming to the SEC. They're coming for a reason. I think Dylan Gabriel has a bounce-back game. He's shown that he can get it done as a dual-threat quarterback, which we didn't see much from him at UCF. Give me the Sooners in a bounce-back game. I think they keep their college football playoff hopes alive. And I think Oklahoma State just maybe can't quite get under the hump, but I do think this is going to be an amazing game. What could be the last Bedlam for a couple years? At least, well, hopefully they bring it back in a couple of years.
Absolutely. And, you know, Stillwater, the time, the place, it all lends itself to an Oklahoma, flattening of little brother's hopes. And I think Mike Gundy's able to rally the troops. He's a man. He's not 40 anymore, but he's still a man. He's still one of the best coaches in college football. They have a great defense. They have an outstanding run game. I think Oklahoma State is able to deliver the second part of the 1-2 punch that ends Oklahoma's college football playoff chances.
Now moving on to, I'll come out and say it. It's our favorite conference. It's the Pac-12, Southern Cal, Washington. JP, who you got this weekend?
You know, I love picking against Southern Cal.
Me too.
I think that they're soft. I think that they ain't got nothing going for them. They have a defense that wouldn't be impressive in JV football. And
How many points did they give up to Cal last week, JP? I'll hand you the mic.
I believe it was 49 points to the Cal Bears.
Oh,
Jaden Ott
goodness.
went ballistic for over 160 rushing yards, and they have to try and defend their place. They haven't been able to under Lincoln Riley. A soft head coach makes for a soft program. Washington, they're not soft. They're a team. They're going to go in there. They're going to meet you nose on nose, hard-hitting football. Give me the Dogs going into the Trojans' home and coming away with a big win as they look to stay undefeated.
It was always the Huskies for me, JP. I've made my case. The college football playoff, I think they should be about number 2. They're incredible. Michael Penix Jr. is just a premier slinger of the rock. They've got incredible receiving talents. Their defense, they play tough. They struggled a little bit last week. They gave up a lot of points to Oregon, but that's Oregon, and Southern Cal doesn't have the makings to stop them at all. I think it's the Huskies pretty handily.
And you know, now our final game, and like you said, it's a game that's usually meant for this final game billing. It's number 8 Alabama and number 14 LSU. Spencer, in a game that feels huge for Nick Saban and Alabama, but even bigger for Brian Kelly, the Tigers came into this year billed as the SEC favorite, preseason number 5 team in the country. If they lose here, they're staring down the barrel of already having 3 losses at the start of November. This is a huge game for both these teams. Who comes out on top?
For me, I'm not betting against Nick Saban. Give me Bama. Give me the Crimson Tide. They've put it together, scored 27 unanswered, and held the Volunteers scoreless last weekend. I think they've got what it takes. They're going to play tough defense against LSU's amazing offense. They are. But Alabama's going to find their footing. Jalen Milroe, legacy game. And I think Bama's one of those teams you got to watch sneaking into that college football playoff race. Everyone's sick of them, but not many people are talking about them. And I think it's the perfect environment for a Nick Saban-led squad to sneak into that number 4 spot later in the year.
Yeah, and you know, it's Brian Kelly. It's under the lights. It's a big road game. And all signs point to an epic meltdown of a collapse. I don't think it's terrible. I think Jane Daniels and the offense of LSU is able to keep them in it. Alabama's just going to be too much, and I think they really find their footing offensively behind their already strong defense. Give me the Crimson Tide of Alabama.
And that's going to do it for Pick'ems. Hopefully I'll maybe end up with a positive record this week. I think my best is 3-3. But that's going to do it for this episode of Ball Don't Lie. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, X, and Facebook at SGTV at USC.
To keep up with all of our content, be sure to also visit us online at sgtv at usc.com. For SGTV, I'm JP Barry.
And I'm Spencer Ball. From all of us here at SGTV, have a great weekend, Carolina. Forever to thee.